You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet Spare. The funeral of a 14-year-old girl from the UK called Hannah Smith has taken place today. Hannah's family say the young teenager took her own life because she was bullied online. Hannah's family say she endured months of torment on question and answer website ask.fm, which is a social networking site where users, who are predominantly teenagers, invite answers to questions from other users on the site. The users can choose to be anonymous. The Latvian-based social networking site has promised to help the police investigate the tragedy. It was due to publicise plans to deal with online bullying today, but has postponed the announcement until after Hannah's funeral. And another high-profile and tragic case has just emerged, and that's the story of Daniel Perry, who is believed to have taken his own life after a recording of him online was used to try and blackmail him. He received a message warning that he would be better off dead if he failed to pay up. An hour later, he committed suicide. Here to talk about the issues, problems, and hopefully some of the ideas on how to prevent cyberbullying is Natalie Farzaneh, the ambassador of BeatBullying, a UK charity that leads anti-bullying campaigns. And Natalie herself was a victim of cyberbullying. Also joining us is a former head teacher and chairman of the Independent School Council, Barnaby Lenon. Scott Freeman, founder of Cybersmile. And on the phone, Dr. Arthur Cassidy, a media psychologist and trolling expert for Knowthenet.org.uk. Now, first of all, I'd like to ask you, Natalie, I've mentioned a couple of the high-profile cases. When you hear them, and especially the one of Daniel Perry this morning, how does it make you feel?
It's really shocking to me. Like, a few years ago, those kids that have taken their life to being bullied, like, that could have been me. Like, my parents could have found me hanging off my wardrobe or something. Like, that's how badly I was bullied, and it's terrible that it's not getting better. It's only getting worse. More and more kids every year are taking their own lives, and nothing's being done to help prevent it or stop it.
Could you, if you don't mind, share your story with us?
Well, I was relentlessly bullied at school. Like, kids would try and shove me downstairs. They put gum in my hair. They'd spit at me. They'd give me racial abuse about the way I look. Like, I'm fat, I'm ugly and stuff. And then my parents bought a computer for me for my schoolwork. They got the internet, and everyone was like, you should get Facebook. And I made a Facebook account, and Facebook led to getting a Formspring account, which is the equivalent of Ask.fm. And then people would send me anonymous messages on Ask.fm, like, kill yourself, you're ugly, the school will be better off without you. And similar insults that Hannah got, like, get cancer and die, drink bleach and stuff like that. And it was heartbreaking.
Because it was happening online to you and you were using the computer after school, were you able to talk about this with your parents, or did you sort of internalise it all because it was just on one screen in front of you?
I made a huge mistake. I didn't tell my parents because I didn't want to make them worry. Like, as a normal kid, I kind of thought, I can deal with this, keep it to myself, keep my mouth shut, everything will be okay, it'll die down. And it was the biggest mistake I could have made.
What would you have done instead?
Going back, I would have definitely have told my parents. From the first message, I would have told my parents straight away.
Dr. Cassidy, why do children not tell their parents in these instances of cyberbullying, do you think?
We do know from our current research that children developmentally are engaging in seeking new forms of identity. And together with that identity is associated fears. It's like exploring where we should be, not where we're going. And some young people I have spoken to and interviewed have talked about the fear of telling parents. It is a little private world, and there is that little part of that brain which is saying, this is mine, I don't want anyone else to enter into it. And listen carefully to what has just been said, that it is very important for these young people to engage parents parents do respect their privacy in most situations, and parents that I've spoken to. And I think it's so important that young people take their parents into their confidence and allow them to discuss these very openly and empathically with them.
Scott Freeman, you're the founder of Cybersmile. Could you initially tell us a bit about that organisation and why you set it up?
Yeah, I set it up 3 years ago. I founded it because my daughter suffered with cyberbullying, and at the time there were no specific organisations dealing with it, and also schools. It was very difficult for schools to take responsibility, and the police. So there's just this massive grey area. So it started off as a blog, and the demand was huge, and it's just evolved over 3 years into a quite a large charity. And
what did your daughter go through?
Well, she had a disagreement at school with friends, and then, as is often the case now, there was an overspill onto social media after school. But it went on for a while without us knowing, her parents. And the problem, basically, kind of online bullies and trolls got involved who didn't know her, and they were trying to encourage her to commit suicide and do all these dreadful things. So it went on for a few months. It was really bad.
Before I come back to you, Dr. Cassidy, to talk about trolling, in particular, I would like to obviously bring Barnaby Lenon into the discussion. We've got parents and the relationship with school and the overspill of social media and bullying into the home and the computers being used at home. Where do you see the initial problem of cyberbullying? Is it the computer usage itself or the content of the computer?
It's a bit of both of those things. I mean, I think that everyone has to realise that these things are not inevitable and can certainly be stopped and controlled if we really want to. It's parents or schools who buy their children these computers, and it's perfectly possible for them to put into place measures which limit the ability, if you like, of children to abuse them. And so, what I would want is to encourage all parents and schools, because I ran a boarding school and we also bought our students computers, but it's going to be particularly parents to think twice before they buy a very young child a smartphone which gives them access to the internet particularly, and even for teenagers, that they have in place clear rules. I think that schools can be very, very helpful because not only can they put in place the sort of basic education that all children clearly need, and indeed educate the parents as well. I mean, when I was a headmaster, I made quite sure that everything I said to children was repeated to the parents so they knew. But I think if schools have rules relating to computer use, then parents very often greatly welcome that because they can blame the school to some extent for the rules which they're going to impose within their own household. So, schools and parents have to work together.
Natalie, do you think your parents made a mistake by perhaps buying you the computer in the first place and that they should have put the parental controls on it? Or this was at a time when no one really knew what the future was going to be like online?
It was about 6 years ago. They bought me my first computer. It was like year 7. I wanted something to type up my homework just to make it more presentable, impress my teachers. And the parental controls, there's ways around them. I found ways to get around them, to look at, certain websites and stuff and talk to people online. So they're easily, you can get through them quite easy.
Scott, you look like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think at Cybersmile, we're the other end of the scale. We don't think there is a technological quick fix to this problem. We think that the problem is wider with society as a whole, and that's what needs addressing. If you look at the where technology is and where teens are with technology, they run rings around their parents, trying to get the parents to enforce something that they don't fully understand. We think is a little bit difficult and unrealistic.
But that's where Barnaby comes in to say that this is where schools have a role to work with the parents and be that sort of shoulder for parents to lean on to enforce the level of understanding or control on these websites.
I do think that schools can help parents to understand what the dangers are. I mean, a lot of parents are just very naive. But I'm also saying that I think that parents shouldn't buy computers for their children when they're too young. I mean, I see, children now as young as 3 or 4 playing with smartphones, and they become quickly addicted to them. And I mean, I do agree that it's very difficult to put in place sort of technical controls, but nevertheless, parents have got to understand what the dangers are. They've got to form a relationship with their children if they possibly can, which allows them to report abuse, and they've got to have in place very sensible measures, particularly, I would say, about excessive use of computers and smartphones. I mean, one of the problems is not just the abuse, the damaging behaviour that goes on, but the amount of time that children are spending on computers and smartphones these days, which is also dangerous.
Dr. Cassidy, then, you're a trolling expert, and you're from knowthenet.org.uk. From what you've heard so far, what lessons could you give to people or to help parents understand the nature of social networking sites?
Only a third of young people involved, we're talking about young teenagers, 12, 13 to 15, who experienced online bullying or trolling, reported it to a social network. Fewer than 1 in 5, that's 17% of teens, were only likely to tell a parent if they'd been affected. And only 1% of teenagers said that telling a teacher would be their first response to online bullying or trolling. Now, that presents several major psychological issues for us to investigate. There is, qualitatively, what we do know is that having interviewed several of these young people in focus groups, we do know that the reason why they don't want to report it is because of the technicalities involved. What is really happening here is that the moderatorship is far too slow. A report button or a abusive report button is really a starting point. It's nothing more than that. It may help towards clarifying some thinking and reasoning in a very structured, logical way as how we might work together, how government and schools might work together with these internet providers to provide a more succinct, a much more rapid, effective and sustainable response to this. What is needed is to have an independent monitoring body which will oversee the nature of comments which are going onto any social networking site. The formation of anti-troll school clubs, which we're discussing seriously here currently in Northern Ireland at the moment, with one of the charities I run in suicide prevention. Also, that the funders, i.e. the social networking people such as Facebook and Twitter and Ask.fm, these people there's a moral imperative here that they ought to be able to fund not only research but to form educational programs into educating parents on the technicalities and how to engage children in terms of socializing them into understanding what not to say and understanding social networking etiquette. And this is very, very important. If they were to employ an overseeing independent monitoring body that could be a combination of educators, psychologists, perhaps a counsellor and a social worker, people who have a deep, succinct interest in anti-bullying and anti-trolling, who are there to monitor this 24 hours a day and to provide immediate support and help and techniques to families and to young people who feel the bullying. My own feeling is here that what we do need is to have pre-moderating of all comments. Now, I know there are other drawbacks to that, but only after a moderator approves the comments, then they could be posted. But then that will also contravene other such things as free speech. So post-moderating of comments would eliminate the time lag, but still incurs the labour costs.
But by looking at every comment, it sounds like a huge job.
Yes. The realities are that might not be possible. What we have to do is to have a clear rethink about how do we go about separating and filtering those which fit into the category of trolling behaviour and cyberbullying in contrast to those which are not. And because we do know, and I can tell you from our own research, that a troll will want to get psychological payoffs. What trolls set out to do, they engage in these pithy put-downs, name-calling and insults, emotional arousal, bullying and harassment. What they get out of this is simply attention and recognition, even if it's negative. The emotional release of venting their anger, venting their power even over the victim. There is the thrill of breaking all social conventions, of sabotaging groups and troll dislikes. Trolls can be postgraduates. Trolls can be children in a school. Trolls can be very well-seasoned businessmen at working blue-chip companies. They can be literally anyone. And this is a methodology that they have. It is quite sociopathic, actually, when you see what has been done and when we investigate the nature of these comments. They can be so highly... They do lack empathy, and we know that is one key characteristic we have found from the study of trolls. They have failed in their socialization into understanding the role of empathy in their own development. So there are major issues with that.
Is trolling any different to cyberbullying?
One of my children appeared on University Challenge, and we had a look at the Twitter feed. And I notice now that every week after University Challenge, trolls appear on Twitter, making the vilest possible comments they can possibly make about the 8 competitors. That is cyberbullying. I mean, there is, in my view, no distinction between the two. And the problem is that once these things start appearing, what can one do about it? There isn't a quick fix reporting system with Twitter. I entirely agree with Dr. Cassidy. What is needed is a far more efficient reporting system with all these sites, and then they need to invest a lot more money in the moderation of the comments that are made. I mean, these companies have been set up to make money through advertising, and they've jolly well got to pay the price for proper, effective moderation of the comments that are going on their sites.
So, yes, that differentiation between trolling and the bullying, cyberbullying, do you think they're the same thing?
I think they're the same thing in my opinion, but I think a troll is more constant, like persistent. Like trolls are usually more persistent. Like they'll create an account and they'll post vile stuff just on that account. Like it won't be them. They'll like think of a made-up name and that will be their account, so no one can recognize them.
That has the effect on someone as much as being bullied online with the words that other cyberbullies used, or is it the sort of anonymity that makes it worse?
The anonymity ought to be banned, really, and this would be something should be given serious educational and academic consideration, because if we are to engage with social networking proprietors to help them to understand the nature of anonymity and how psychologically destructive that can be in possibly contributing in a very significant way exclusively to the death of young people, I think we've got to take this anonymity to a much more higher level.
Go on, Scott.
Yeah, can I just say that this all the different talk of anonymity being controlled, policing and restricting, that they are all the contributing factors that stop the children getting the help they need. Because what wasn't mentioned earlier in the research is that what we found is the biggest reason for children not telling their parents is because they're scared of their parents taking their laptop from them or closing their Facebook account, or because they're scared of losing their privileges. That's the biggest reason people don't tell their parents. And when children hear restrict this, stop this, police this, it stops your children telling you what's happening. That's not. We don't feel at Cybersmile that's the way forward. It's all about making the children feel like they can talk to you and dealing with the fact that the entire society has learned. Our children have learned behaviour that it's okay to be hateful because they've seen it in the media. They've seen comments in the media that are hating about the media. And it's just become learned behaviour. It's now a bit acceptable to be hateful, and it's going to take 2 generations to fix that.
Natalie, you were nodding your head there in agreement with Scott about the sort of hatred within society. Yeah. And you'd suggest that was more of a problem that needs dealing with than necessarily, like Scott says, putting certain policing and controls in it, because at the end of the day, like you also said, teenagers are run rings around their parents in terms of what's technologically available anyway.
Definitely. Like, I'm only 17, and my friends, like, if they see someone fall over in the street, they will laugh. They won't be like, are you okay? They'll laugh because that's just how they are. Or if they see someone who looks weird in public, they'll take a picture and they'll post it on Facebook or Twitter with something nasty. Like, kids today are so, like, desensitized by everything that they just don't know. Some kids don't really know what bullying is anymore.
But you're 17, and so in this panel, you're our youngest member. What sets you apart? How is it you can see this? Is it your prior experience as someone who was bullied online?
Definitely, and because it's my generation as well. Like, I went all the way through secondary school. I saw all the nasty things, the horrible things that people would do, and I don't know, it's terrible. It's much worse than it was like 40 years ago. Like, if you were at school, you'd get bullied, you'd go home, and that would be it. But now it follows you home, it follows you everywhere.
Barnaby, you're agreeing?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do agree with that, but I think another point I want to make, and that is that we want to try and put into place systems which make young people think twice before they do start bullying other people on the internet. They've got to feel that there is a certain amount of risk attached to it. I mean, I've worked all my life teaching teenage boys, and teenage boys are very poor at appreciating risk, actually, in all sorts of areas of their life. I mean, their brains are still developing. And one has to constantly emphasize, in all sorts of areas of life, that if you do this, it can lead to that. If you misbehave on the internet, you will lose your computer, or it will be tracked in some way. It can be tracked technologically. And so, you know, I'm all in favour of, particularly the companies that are involved in all of this, putting in place measures which encourages people to believe that they are being watched and that there'll be repercussions if they do the wrong thing.
But I think we have to, or it should be possible to strike that balance between you're being watched and the not too many restrictions, because that encourages youngsters to go the other avenue and perhaps find another way round, which I suppose, Natalie, you would agree with, that they won't stop at anything.
They won't stop.
No. If you look at the campaigns with drink driving and AIDS, both successful campaigns of changing opinions and behaviour. And that is not through, for instance, drink driving is not through the driving ban. That's because it was made to be taboo, and you shouldn't do it. And I think the important thing is to make not bullying cooler than bullying, and then you will be getting somewhere, not restricting it. You need to get support from the teens, from the people that are involved, and educate them, show them the damage it's doing, show them some first-hand accounts of the victims and the victims' families who have tragically committed suicide. That's what we do in our workshops, and the impact it has on these teens. It makes them realise the damage they're doing. The problems with the internet is the disattachment. It's the disattachment from reality. So there is no empathy kicking in because they think they're dealing with real feelings and not cyber feelings. So that's what needs to be done.
And I'm really interested in just getting a bit more from you as to how at 17 you've come from being bullied and can now be an ambassador for a campaign group like BeatBullying.
Can I say my opinion of what I think schools should do?
Please.
Just like we have like life education, like PSHE lesson, there should be lessons on how to use the internet correctly. It may sound really stupid, but I think maybe one lesson a month could really help young people, like what you should do online, what you shouldn't, how cyberbullying affects people. I don't think there's enough awareness. I think teachers need to do more. Not just like teaching, but I think if teachers create like a relationship with their students will feel more comfortable talking to them.
But teachers need that guidance initially, which is where I guess what you were saying, Dr. Cassidy, of having schools, education, psychologists and an overarching group to advise.
Yes, what I have advocated for several years now is that in order to make a breakthrough here, and I'm listening very carefully and endorse what both Natalie and Scott have said, we have to establish, first of all, anti-troll school clubs in schools and colleges and even at university level, because that has to be taken much more seriously. And I think we have to inform and educate so that this becomes part of the socialization process into higher education, moving right through the early stage from primary right through to secondary and comprehensive right through the system. Because the young people that I have worked with and young people I taught in universities, for example, are saying the exactly same thing. There is a paucity of knowledge about how to deal with this. And I feel that what we have to do here is to establish a very sound educational initiative here that is going to actually work. I would really love to see a GCSE subject here in an A-level subject or an AA subject which really engages young people to understand the whole nature of risk behaviors on the internet, because they're still developing into from early to late adolescence and trying to negotiate that developmental pathway. And part of doing that is to support headmasters and teaching staff, which need far, far more support, both emotionally and financial, in order to attain and maintain those standards of teaching in information technology. That would be my particular view at the moment.
Barnaby, I'd like to hear from you, really, because Natalie's mentioned the role teachers have to play. How much more support can they be given, and how much should they take on their shoulders?
Yeah, I think the trouble is that one can exaggerate the role of education and of schools. I mean, when I was a teenager, the great campaign was to stop us all smoking, and we had monthly lectures about the damage that smoking was going to do to us. And actually, it didn't work. None of the anti-smoking education that we had worked for many years, and it was only when the government made it illegal to smoke in public places and then started to limit the availability of cigarettes and put up the price that smoking began to fall, as it has done in recent years. And so, I mean, of course there's got to be education, and I've already made the point that I think parents as well as the children need to be in receipt of regular education. But in the end, I'm not sure that any of that will work, and that in the end what's got to happen is there's got to be clear rules, led probably by the government, but involving these companies that are putting all of this stuff out, and they've got to be under some sort of strict control, which will in the end make it difficult for people to abuse others on the internet, and above all to make the individuals who are doing this realise that there can be repercussions, because at the moment, as has already been said, these sociopaths feel completely free to do whatever they like, and we've got to move on so that they there's some comeback against those people.
Scott?
Yeah, going back to the PSHE comment, we've actually, Cybersmile are campaigning because we feel that PSHE should be part of the curriculum, because it's not presently. And that is the perfect vehicle to educate children about cyberbullying and the impact it has on people. It's already in place. Unfortunately, we've just missed the government review on that, but that's what needs. We feel that's what needs to be done. It's the perfect vehicle. It's already in schools, and that's where you could be teaching the impact this has had, because PSHE is for, that's exactly what it's for, and things like alcohol and drugs and social problems, which I think there's far more people walking around 10 years after they've left school wishing they'd been educated more about drink, drugs and things like that than and probably never used a scientific calculator since the day they left school. That's our opinion. We think that the PSHE is far more important than it's being recognised for, and that's the perfect vehicle to do the education. Education's the key. Education for the children, education for the parents, and education for the bullies themselves.
There is a broader problem, and that is that children become addicted to using computers and the internet. It's a complete waste of time. It's unproductive. Mostly they're just playing banal games, or they're involved in chit-chat. And parents and schools need to recognise that children can be throwing their lives away, wasting time on computers, and there needs therefore to be some limit to it.
On that note, I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me on The Voice of Russia. Scott Freeman from Cybersmile, Dr. Arthur Cassidy, Natalie Farzaneh from BeatBullying, and former head teacher Barnaby Lenon, chairman of the Independent School Council.